The campaign for a referendum on Europe is heading for the southwest. An all-party group called the People's Pledge this week announced 6 constituencies in Devon and Cornwall where they plan to hold a local poll on the issue. The news should please at least 3 of the region's MPs who've signed up to the campaign. But there are those that worry people will vote with an eye on the current troubles in Europe rather than its long-term prospects. Jenny Kumar reports.
Good evening, good people of Shaldon.
It's 5 years since the people of Shaldon were asked to consider Europe. A big majority voted in favour of a referendum on the EU treaty.
Voting yes, 260. Voting no, 12. There was one.
But turnout was a mere 18%.
It isn't pathetic. I've said before that people are cynical of the political processes in this country, and it's good to get people to turn out anyway. No, I think this is a good result.
A campaign group called the People's Pledge now wants to hold similar local polls as a way of pressurising the government to hold a national referendum. This week they published a list of the constituencies where they'd like to do this. 6 of them are in the southwest, and many of them are marginal Conservative seats where UKIP are strong, like Camborne and Redruth.
In the very southwest we've got George Eustace, as a fine man. I worked with him on No to AV. But he has a wafer-thin majority of 66. He's a former UKIP candidate, of course, and now he believes in renegotiation, and we wanted to try and convince him otherwise.
In April, the People's Pledge held their first ballot in Thurrock in Essex, where the Conservative MP won their seat by just 92 votes. Here, 90% said yes to a national poll. Turnout was 30%. This week, Anne-Marie Morris, the Newton Abbot MP, became the 3rd in the southwest to sign up to the campaign.
In my constituency, I have very many very small businesses who are particularly burdened by the high level of regulation, much coming from Europe, and of course my rural community and the farmers. So for them it's a real issue. People need to have a say, but it needs to be an informed say, and I'm very, very determined that the government not only allows them to have that say, but it's on an informed basis.
Anne-Marie Morris was one of 7 South West Rebel MPs who voted in favour of a referendum last year. Here in the constituency of Torridge and West Devon, the local MP Geoffrey Cox voted with the government and against the poll, and his seat is being targeted by the People's Pledge campaign. But the MP shares similar views to this local Conservative councillor.
I'm not sure that it's practically possible to completely step outside. However, I would like to see us renegotiate our current position.
In the last general election, UKIP came 3rd in this area. Here in Tavistock's Conservative Club, I found considerable support for the idea of an in-out referendum on the EU.
They've got so much control over us. This is Great Britain, and we shouldn't have to put up with what Europe tells us what we've got to do.
And out on the streets away from the Conservative Club, there were similar views.
Well, I just think it is important. I think it's important for people to be able to say what they think.
I do feel people more and more are thinking it would be good if we could leave the European Union.
Some residents in Devon and Cornwall could soon get the chance to express their views on Europe at the ballot box. The People's Pledge have announced they'll be holding their next poll in Manchester this July, but they hope to hold votes in the southwest in the autumn.
Jenny Kumar reporting there. Jude, is it time for a referendum on Europe, do you think?
I think at the moment Europe's got quite enough turmoil without referendums going on about, countries leaving, to be honest. And whatever happens in Europe affects our economy, and really at the moment our economy needs all the help it can get.
John Cruddas is supporting a referendum. He signed up this week. That's the party strategist for Labour. Do you think he senses votes here? There must be a reason that he's signing up for this. Would you not support him?
I think in the future there will be a referendum, because it's getting to the point where this issue has to be dealt with once and for all, doesn't it?
Well, that's right. There hasn't been a referendum on it since the 70s, and people are making, this is a democratic process. Things have drastically changed since the 70s with our relationship with Europe. Surely people should be given a chance to have their say, do you think?
Yeah, I just don't feel that right now it's the most important issue facing any of us.
Rosie, would you agree?
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I think it's absolute lunacy. The time for considerations of this nature is a time of calm when people can look at the arguments for and against. I actually believe that there does need to be a re-evaluation of the way in which the EU works. Some of the problems that have emerged now have resulted because of a lack of sort of governance issues being conducted properly, and we do need to consider those issues. But now it would be absolute madness, and the impact on our economy, where 40% plus of trade is based in Europe, would be really, really devastating. It would also be devastating on the EU project as a whole. The impact of Britain withdrawing on the rest of the Eurozone would be
saying, though,
awful.
that having a referendum would be madness is basically because you think the public would vote to pull out of Europe, really.
I think obviously
given the current climate,
are really scaremongering about this at the moment.
Is that not taking away from the electorate some kind of sense that they can see long term as well, that they can work this out for themselves, they can weigh up the options?
When people vote out of fear, they always make appalling decisions. I mean, history has shown that, you know, globally. People make bad decisions when they're voting out of fear. That's why Hitler got supported in the 1930s.
It is true, though, isn't it, that actually if the Lib Dems had their way, we would be in the single currency right now. And that fact surely undermines some credibility that the Lib Dems have with how they believe we should deal with Europe.
I don't think that's strictly accurate, actually. If you look at what was happening at the time of the 1990s, when we were actually thinking about whether we went into the single currency, there's always been a split in my party as to whether we did or we didn't. And actually, I think this country in the end did make the right decision about that. What I'm concerned about is that David Cameron marginalising himself from the mainstream within the EU is losing our ability to impact on what might happen with rescue packages and bailouts now.
Just briefly, Jude, you campaigned Camborne in Redruth, one of the areas to be targeted actually in these polls. What's the mood like over Europe?
I think people are far more concerned about whether they can pay their rent, whether their kids are going to get a job, whether they've still got a job at the end of the month.
Places like Plymouth, though, UKIP got an awful lot of votes, didn't they? Over 20% of votes to UKIP. Surely people are telling you something, aren't they?
To be honest, they're not telling me that on the doorstep. The last time anyone talked to me about Europe on the doorstep was about 2008, and he said we should get out of Europe, and I said Cornwall is getting about £300 million from Europe over the next few years, and he said, well, after that we should get out.
Okay.